Hello and welcome to everybody to this, our final session in this series for small to medium energy user businesses and councils on renewable energy procurement. My name is Jackie McEwen and I'm Program Director at the Business Renewable Centre Australia. And we've been engaged by the City of Sydney on behalf of the CitySwitch and Sustainable Destination Partnership Programs to deliver these sessions to you. All of the sessions that have been delivered so far, the online versions have been recorded. So if you missed those, they are available on our website. So thanks again to Jade and her team for having us today. And we are delighted also to have a guest speaker who'll be joining us a little bit later from the City of Melbourne, Liam Henderson, who led the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project 2 or MREP 2, which was a group buy, and he will kindly share his experience and expertise in that area. I'm also joined today, in addition to the by the City of Sydney, and also a couple of people from my team. So John Prendergast, one of our technical directors at BRC-A, there's John Waving, and also Alex Nasser, our project officer and technical extraordinaire. So moving on to today's session, just on the next slide there, thanks Alex. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And for us here in Sydney today, this is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Next slide, thanks Alex. So who are we? If you haven't joined any of these sessions before and you're brand new to us, we are Australia's leading organisation for off-site renewable energy procurement for business, especially via corporate PPA. And we provide all of those services there listed in the middle of that slide. We were originally established with funding from state and government bodies. And we are an independent not-for-profit organisation. So just a little bit of context on this training series. So far in our series, we've covered the how-to of renewable energy procurement options for small energy users. This session will also be useful for the larger energy users who might be joining us today. In our first session, we took you through the reasons why you might consider green power and LGCs, and then the practicalities of how you would do that and how you would build the business case. In the second session, we took you through the basics of retail PPAs, who's doing them, why, the key types of retail PPAs, and some great case studies. In the third session, we expanded your learnings on the retail PPA process, a bit more on the business case of how to, and the how to, very much the detailed procurement process, supported again by case studies from across industry. So today we finally have the final piece in the puzzle. This is all about PPA group buys, so or also known as aggregation purchasing. So we're building on the previous sessions. We won't take you through the what is a PPA or any of that sort of thing. So as I mentioned, if you are brand new to these concepts, please take a look at those previous sessions. So just on to the next slides. What are we going to cover today? We're going to talk a little bit first about the opportunity of joining together in a group purchasing arrangement. We're going to talk about, at a high level, what the various procurement options are and how they differ between individual companies, smaller companies and buyers groups. We'll talk about the benefits and the challenges of aggregating, some case studies and lessons learned. As I mentioned, we'll have an industry presentation from Liam. We'll also take you through then the key steps and how you can get started, and a little bit on where you can get some more information. We have allowed sort of a 10-15 minute period at the end of this session for questions and discussion. If you do in the meantime have any questions, and I can see that a few things are popping up on the chat already, thanks everyone for participating there. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll try and catch them as we go, and otherwise we'll have time for them at the end. So now just handing over to Alex for a quick poll. Thanks very much, Alex.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so everyone on your screen should be one of two polls. This is just us asking where you're coming from in terms of your background of PPAs. Do any of these words kind of sound familiar to you? It's all anonymous, so feel free to be as honest as you can. And so, yeah, this is just useful for us kind of understanding who's in the crowd today, and how we can better tailor the message and content to you throughout. And so, yeah, thank you for those already answering. We'll just have a couple more seconds on that. But so far, it seems that most people here are investigating the options and what might be available to them. Some have executed PPAs. That's very good to see. It'd be great to get some of your experiences in some of the following exercises that we do. And so, yeah, and some have heard no details but have heard about PPA. So, yeah, very good. So I'm just going to end that poll now and share those. So, as I said, it was mainly those three groups, the vast majority being investigating options. So, yeah, really glad that you're in a room here today with us. Now, one more poll that we've got is just to see who came to our previous session on Retail PPA. So the ones that Jackie was talking about. Good to see that there's a good mix at the moment. Okay, now Yes is taking the lead. Cool. We've got some new people and some returning veterans, which is very good to see. So yeah, I'll just end the poll there. Thank you for that. Okay, well, look, it's a good mix. So we're going to have a very diverse conversation with some of these exercises, and feel free to ask any questions regardless of which side of the fence you're on. So I'll stop sharing and pass back to you, Jackie.
Thanks very much, Alex. So, yeah, really important for those people. If you're sitting here and wanting to understand how a PPA actually works, yeah, take a look at those recorded sessions. We have two sessions on that. It's the bio basics and the procurement process for retail PPAs. So just moving on to the next slide there. So we've talked about the session goals. So what we really want to understand here is why do companies actually opt to do this? And what is that opportunity? What could that opportunity look like for maybe a portion of this group who've joined today, or a group of other organisations, potentially looking at a group from maybe the Sustainable Destinations Partnership Program, or maybe the CitySwitch, or a mixture of both, or in fact others joining as well. And so we've mentioned all the other little bits and pieces, so let's get stuck into the very first exercise on the next question. So we're just going to jump into some breakout groups just to understand why you as an organisation, or you within your organisation, are starting to look at group buying. What are you considering? Are you interested in this because you're looking at better price, better negotiation opportunities, and attracting more offers? Are you looking at additionality in your group? Maybe you're looking to share the expertise and the workload, maybe a bit of reduced or shared risk, or maybe you're actually looking at strengthening some relationships perhaps along your value chain. So we'll just break out for 5 minutes now. Once you do jump into those groups, just introduce yourselves to the group. Name's fine, and just let's have a little chat about this question. See you back in 5 minutes. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I hope you had a worthwhile conversation. We certainly did in our group. We don't have a lot of time for sharing, but we did have several organisations in our group talking particularly about that upper end of achieving something bigger, achieving something that might be a directive from the top down in your organisation, and then looking at what those options are beyond just procuring on your own. So we'll just move on to the next slide now. Thanks, everyone. So what is the opportunity? So a little bit of a picture at what an opportunity could look like. It could be something like 5 iconic Sustainable Development Partnership organisations combine in a group PPA or a corporate PPA to support finance of a new 5 megawatt solar farm. Or you could even look at, and we won't really go into this sort of as much, but it could also be a green power purchase. You could also look at branding it quite differently depending on what the group is. So it might all be hospitality, or major destinations across New South Wales or even broader. But grouping together gives you that sort of grander vision and that grander sort of opportunity for that announcement that you can make, whichever way you might go. Just on to the next slide. So aggregating demand with others significantly increases your renewable energy procurement options and your ability to support new wind and solar projects with additionality. And we'll come back to this in a minute. But essentially, it is an opportunity for collaboration. I've put there hospitality leaders, but it could end up being a slightly different group, as I mentioned. And what we're really looking at is all of these opportunities, and some of these are common to all PPAs, but some are specific to aggregating. So you've really got a sort of double whammy of benefits here. You've got that opportunity to manage those long-term energy cost risks and lock in at a price, and reducing your exposure to that wholesale electricity price, which you would be exposed to now if you're in a standard electricity contract, which most organisations are, particularly if you're just on a rolling contract, progressive purchasing. Obviously, reducing emissions and associated carbon liabilities, a very important goal for a lot of organisations, and sort of the key goal of the group that I was speaking to just now. And really sort of positioning organisations as sustainability leaders across your sector, strengthening your corporate brand. These sorts of things are all very similar sorts of goals. And then, as I mentioned, being able to really support that new investment in renewables, that additionality concept, which we'll revisit shortly. Next slide. Thanks, Alex. So what does it look like in terms of comparing the impact? So what we've done here, in order to understand that potential impact for a group, you can compare what a group might achieve compared with just an individual company. So in this case, company A, with 2 gigawatt hour per annum electricity consumption, who on their own could look to green power, being a fairly small energy buyer, or maybe in a really active market, might be looking at a retail PPA with a portfolio of operating projects. So you may not get the opportunity to actually identify the specific project, but you will be going renewable. You will be reducing your emissions, in that case, 2,000 tonnes of emission reductions. And that's certainly an achievement in itself and nothing to be sniffed at. However, in a buyer's group situation, there's an added opportunity. If you were to combine with 5 companies of a similar size, and that doesn't need to be similar size, they can all be different sizes, you've got the opportunity then to actually procure that from, in this case, due to that size of group, a 5 megawatt solar farm. So that's a smaller solar farm. Obviously, larger group, larger offtake, larger projects. In this case, 5 times your potential for emissions reductions on your own. You're participating in something that reduces a lot more emissions. And you're also supporting $10 million of investment in a new renewable energy capacity. And that's what we call additionality. So it's that direct investment in new renewable energy generating projects going into the grid. And potentially an Australian first, depending on the sector that you're in, or the location. So a lot of opportunities there. And a little bit photo there on the right. This was the mayor of the City of Melbourne. We'll be hearing from the City of Melbourne a little bit later, when they announced their PPA together with 14 organisations several years ago. So next slide. So key options for small to medium buyers. We've talked about these obviously in great detail in this series, and we've covered essentially the first 3 of those, the switching to green power, the LGCs and the retail PPAs with operating solar or wind. There are obviously some other innovative alternatives. We've got a little bit of information about things like project equity and community solar on our website, and a little bit more coming up in a some future BRC webinars, but essentially you are limited to those options. Next slide, Alex. Obviously, when you then join a buyers group, this can expand your options to include other types of PPAs, which ultimately gives you greater choice and ideally greater value and purchasing power in the market. So it expands it to include 2 types of retail PPAs, so that can be with an operating or a new solar or wind farm, or it could also be potentially a wholesale PPA, also with a new or an operating solar or wind farm. And then you've also got a third type, which is a retailer sleeve PPA. So this is essentially a wholesale PPA sleeved by a retail agreement. So we won't go into the mechanics of all of these options today, but it's just important for you to understand that when you do get to the stage of understanding the group and looking at what those options are, this does give you much greater opportunity for types of contracts and also impact in the market. So then finally, we've been edging a little bit closer to this slide with these various benefits and challenges. So a number of collaborative PPA deals have been successfully completed. Sorry, just the next slide there, Alex. Thanks. So you're not the first if you're looking at doing this now. So the benefits and the challenges of aggregation have become quite well defined by those who've gone before. And this is very helpful if you're looking at this stage. So by aggregating load, you can use scale to secure competitive pricing for electricity for renewable energy projects. Being a member of a buyers group also allows companies to combine different skill sets that are needed to execute corporate PPAs, and also giving you greater leverage. You're essentially reducing some of the risks and being able to negotiate better terms within your group. However, these collaborative models do also have some challenges. There's an added level of complexity, as you'd expect when you're dealing in a group arrangement. And so these have to be considered obviously in the context of those benefits. So agreeing common objectives is very important. That's why we really ran that initial sort of question around why you're looking at it. You can imagine if you've got a group that's very split between purely sustainability goals, maybe against more purely financial goals for doing this, then that's going to create some challenges when you come to actually going to tender and assessing those tenders. So agreeing and aligning those common objectives is very important. We'll come back to that a little bit later. There is a need to establish some governance structures and decision-making principles and approaches so that you can agree within a group. So they do tend to take a little bit more time because you do need to do that. Facilitating the communications, people say that this is just about the most important thing, making sure that everyone is on the same page with every change or every advancement in the group's process. Obviously, your own internal stakeholder management, so being able to communicate what's happening in the group to your internal stakeholders. It's very important. And obviously, the certainty of success. Obviously, all organisations want to be involved in a successful activity, and there may be bumps in the road that you need to deal with along the way. So it's obviously very important for organisations to have a little bit of certainty around that success. So I think taking that in bite-sized pieces can be a really good approach to that. But I'm now going to hand over to Jonathan, who's going to take us through some case studies. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jackie. So on this slide are the summaries of Melbourne Renewable Energy Project 1 and number 2 as well. Liam from City of Melbourne is going to be speaking in more detail on MREP 2 later on. So hopefully he's not back from having his snack, so I can speak without feeling embarrassed about his project. But on MREP 1, it was an Australian first at the time, run by Adam at City of Melbourne, led by him. and it included a group of 14 organisations, 3 councils, I think it was, 2 unis, cultural organisations, Australia Post, Bank Australia, etc. So quite a varied group of different organisations of different offtake and different cultures. It resulted in a 88 gigawatt hour per annum total offtake with a 10-year contract with Tango, which is a subsidiary of Pacific Hydro. Pacific Hydro, a long-standing renewable energy asset developer and owner in Australia, and also in South America as well, headquartered in Melbourne, I think. And from that PPA, Tango contracted the Crowlands wind farm developed by Pacific Hydro, so the PPA underpinned the finance of that new wind farm, which is a fantastic outcome. I remember speaking to Adam after the deal was announced. I said, would you do it again? He said, no. Then he said, actually, I think a smaller group of more similar sizes for each offtake and of companies or organisations that has similar objectives and so on. And someone described it, a group deal with so many different organisations, like trying to host a kids party where everyone has a different food they don't like and trying to find a food that they will all like. It was tricky to find a deal that met everyone's objectives, and a great outcome that it was possible to be done. And I remember how much the market changed during this deal. We had $40 per megawatt hour wholesale prices and $80 per LGC at the time. Then it reversed. LGCs became cheap and wholesale prices went up with the closure of Hazelwood. So they had to navigate all that market turmoil whilst trying to agree a deal that was happy for the supplier and for the 14 buyer members. For MREP 2, that really leveraged the learnings of MREP 1, so facilitated again by City of Melbourne, John Griffith and Liam Henderson. And they commented that the collaborative attitude was an absolute must, and resulted in a tender and a 10.5-year retail PPA with Tango again, and contracting 110 gigawatt hours as a total group from Yallowick South Wind Farm and 5 other wind assets. The buyers included Cbus Property, Citywide Asphalt, Deakin Uni, RMIT, Fulton Hogan ISPT, Mondelez International. We heard from David earlier, who's from a construction company himself. So please tune into Liam's comments and have any questions ready with Fulton Hogan and Citywide Asphalt participating in that deal. So 2 more. So firstly, Lion Brewery. Lion are a very large energy user for beer brewing, and they anchored this deal. So they were the major off-taker. And they did most of the lead procurement work, negotiation, and so on, and invited dozens, hundreds of pubs in New South Wales to join in on the deal. So it resulted in a 10-year PPA with Engie and Simply Energy, who did own Hazelwood and closed it, and now are investor owners and off-takers of several wind and solar projects around Australia. So this was the first supply chain PPA in Australia, led by Lion, and bringing together a number of smaller buyers with them. And it saw a significant decrease in energy costs and long-term certainty on energy costs, supported by the development of Silverleaf Solar Farm in New South Wales near Narrabri. The next one, we've got Helen on the webinar today, so I feel a bit nervous speaking about her project for SS Rock, but that included 25 councils in New South Wales, mainly around the Sydney area, 214 gigawatt hours, a 4.5-year retail PPA plus an extension for 4 years, an option to extend, with Zen Energy. Zen Energy are based in South Australia. I believe Ross Garneau is part of them, or was, and long-standing history in renewables in South Australia and spreading across the east coast of Australia. They both in their media release announced both sustainability and financial drivers, which is quite common. It's typically not one or the other, but that combination that really makes these deals sing. And that saw offtakes with Moree Solar Farm, Nevertire Solar Farm, and Hillston Solar Farm in New South Wales. And finally, Northern Beaches Council. So they'd previously executed a 7-year retail PPA for council load with Iberdrola for 100% renewable electricity with a 5-year fixed price and a goal for 100% renewables by 2030 and 60% greenhouse gas emissions cut by 2040. Iberdrola are a Spanish company who acquired Infigen, who are similar to Pacific Hydro, one of the original sort of wind project developers in Australia. And Infigen had started providing commercial retail supply, and Iberdrola really building that out and supplying retail PPAs. Pretty attractive for smaller buyers, where you can sign with a retailer who can do the PPAs and supply that power to you. Iberdrola are very active currently. They've just completed the 170 megawatt Avonlea solar farm near Narrandera in New South Wales, and are currently developing the Flyers Creek wind farm near Bathurst. The council appointed a facilitator so they're now seeking to facilitate a PPA for businesses within their LGA. So Northern Beaches Council have done it for themselves and now helping other organisations in their local government area to do it, because they've noted that commercial emissions represent 37% of the LGA's carbon emissions. Council have appointed a facilitator to aggregate the demand of the participating businesses. They started that in March 2023, and generally have to be over 100 megawatt hours per annum to participate. In their statement, they said this opportunity will support local businesses to join forces, reduce their bills, and ultimately their carbon emissions. It's a great model, and we're glad that we can help get this initiative off the ground. Just a note there that they may still be open to participants for anyone on the call today.
And I just wondered, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Jonathan, but if there is anyone here from Northern Beaches Council that has joined. I couldn't see the names, but obviously if you have, feel free to jump in and let us know whether or not that remains an opportunity for participants to join. I understand it was originally particularly focused on businesses within the LGA, but it may in fact be broader. So that's probably worth having a look into as well. So any questions for Jonathan on any of those case studies? I think if you've questions about the MREP case studies, they may well be answered shortly. But if you've got any other questions, particularly about the Lion example, which for us is a really interesting example of what we would call a supply chain PPA. So Lion has obviously contracted together with their supply chain in that situation. We've seen a few examples of this globally with PepsiCo and Co-op supermarket in the UK. And then we've also seen this from Walmart's gigaton PPA gigaton project in the US. Some really interesting models there. Whilst not everyone can be big enough to do that, or may not have anyone in their supply chain who might be that large to lead, there's certainly interesting examples and worth considering if this is something that you're looking at. So unless I've missed it, I haven't seen any particular questions come up, so we'll just move on to the activity. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, so we'll have another breakout activity, and that's around barriers that you might face in aggregating. So on the outset, are you less likely to be able to obtain internal buy-in or approvals? Are there barriers to agreeing the goals amongst the members? Selecting the best offer that you might have different objectives within the group? Determining the best size group, do we want 4 of us or 40 of us? And attracting others to join or commit, and any other barriers. So we'll just have a group exercise discussing those.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. we were just having a really good conversation in our group about, particularly for property or, you know, asset owners within organisations and looking at ways to deal with that sort of multi-stakeholder, multi-property challenge. So we'll revisit that at the end of the session, but I hope you all found that a helpful session to hear some of the other barriers. So we're going to hear a little bit more about MREP2 and barriers and how those were addressed. And just before we do, just swapping to that next slide. Thanks, Alex. And so this slide really tells us a little bit about the MREP1 project. These were their learnings that they communicated as part of one of the sessions we ran soon after MREP was executed. And they do give a little bit of a hint around some of those barriers that are important to consider so that you can manage a process if you are looking at aggregating. Just on the right there, those are obviously all of the logos of the participating organisations. So being aware of your drivers, and we've already started to sort of hammer this learning within the group quite heavily, but it's incredibly important to get those drivers aligned across your group. Having a clear procurement process from the start. So obviously different organisations have different procurement processes and different ways of doing things. Making sure that you're going to agree on what that process is going to be. And that might mean that you need to go and speak to your procurement team internally about having to do things a little bit differently for this particular contract type. So there's a little bit of both sides of the coin being needed to be massaged there. Retaining trusted consultants. So I think this one became very important because you know, your technical understanding comes very much from that consultancy group. So what will happen is if you do form a group, as a group, you will engage consultants, usually energy consultants and legal consultants. You might also have some of those functions internally, but they'll be looking more at your position as an individual company. This is more for that greater group, and making sure you know, you're retaining those who you have built that trust and built that understanding with around how you want things to work. I guess another really important practicality is that different consultants have different ways of modelling. So if you do end up changing halfway through due to, you know, needing to re-tender things because of your current procurement contracts processes in your organisation require you to do it, say, every 6 months or however often, that can be a problem as well for having to sort of go back to the drawing board, as it were. They warned that it must be a priority for the lead organisation. So that if you do have a lead organisation, generally there is one or two lead organisations, it must be a priority for that organisation. Others might be able to tag on along a little bit more, but without that you know, firm position of those lead organisations, the deal just won't happen. Don't overestimate NEM knowledge. That's a national electricity market knowledge. So that goes for both within the group and within your own organisation, mapping out those stakeholders and making sure that they are clear on how it works. Having an understanding of the electricity market is very important. For a wholesale PPA, it's even more important. But even for a retail PPA, understanding a little bit about the market dynamics is really critical for being able to answer questions from your CFO and your CEO around how that deal might compare in the market, and how you can know that, have confidence in that answer, and also how you can explain things internally. Obviously, we've got a lot of tools to enable you to do that, and we also run training. Stakeholder management, as I've hinted at just in that previous point, having a really clear decision-making framework, as we mentioned earlier, and allowing a lot more time than you might expect for that stakeholder engagement process and that learning and acceptance process internally. And then finally, there being different levels of comfort with uncertainty which could change the answer. So different organisations will have different levels of risk aversion when it comes to the market and participating in this way. And so you've got to be really aware of those differences, and that they could change the type of deal that you actually end up going for in the end. So some really important learnings, but I'm now going to hand over to someone who can answer your questions about potentially all of those, and also a whole lot more, particularly with regards to the MREP2, and that's Liam Henderson. Liam is the Renewable Energy Lead of Power Melbourne, and Power Melbourne Principal at the Climate Change and City Resilience of the City of Melbourne. So please make Liam welcome. Thanks very much, Liam.
Thanks, Jackie, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today and share some of our experience from a couple of group PPA processes that we've been heavily involved in. So I'll be talking about the two Melbourne renewable energy projects, and hope that some of what I cover might be useful to those of you considering similar group opportunities. Alex, you're driving the slides. Thanks. To jump to the next one. So I thought I might this is probably covering what JP just said earlier, but just to contextualize where the MREP projects, where they kind of fit in the types of group power purchase agreements there could be. So MREP 1 was City of Melbourne led that process and facilitated a group of 14 other partners to contract from a new wind farm, as it ended up being. And that was in 2017, and it was pretty early days for PPAs. There was no playbook for it, and there was a lot of learning that had to be done by us and also by industry and consultant teams and others. So it took about 3 years, I think, but the market and everyone has matured a lot more. And there's fantastic resources available and support like what the BRC-A provide and City of Sydney provide that can really streamline this whole process. So it's a very known pathway now, and everything that you need is on BRC-A's website. But just to say, so that was kind of a lead buyer type of model. There's other types that was been spoken about, like the SS Rock group of councils, for example. There's the supply chain type deals where you've got a large lead that are bringing their supply chain with them, and there's also examples of third-party facilitation. So that was more the MREP 2 model. So we kind of were a buyer the first time round, and the second time round we used our experience to help other businesses in our municipality to go through that same process, and helped to make that process more efficient. But then I understand that was it Northern Beaches looking to do a similar facilitated PPA? They're looking at that, and down here in Victoria, City of Yarra are doing a business renewables buying group too, where they've appointed a facilitator to support businesses through. So anyway, so when I talk about MREP, just have that in mind, that those are the types of examples, and that's not to say that there aren't others that there may be as well. Thanks, Alex. So this just speaks to there was 20 organisations involved across the two MREP projects. There was 14 in the first group and 7 in the second. That doesn't add up to 20. One of the businesses, RMIT University, was involved in both. And that was really actually extremely helpful because they could bring their experience into the second process. And these projects have had massive benefits for the organisations involved, as well as the energy system and broader social and environmental benefits as well. That's a photo of Crowlands wind farm. So that's the wind farm that was catalysed through the first MREP project. And there was, I'll come on to it, but the jobs and regional development that occurs through these projects is really significant, as well as the ability for the organisations involved to just really drive down their corporate emissions. And for us as a local government, the two projects combined represents the equivalent of 5% of our city's emissions. So that's a pretty big chunk, from two projects. So they're really substantial project opportunities with PPAs. I mean, how else are you going to get there? You know, you can spend $20 million doing energy efficiency, or you can, you know, spend a year doing a PPA and, you know, wipe out 60-70% of your emissions right there. So worth considering for sure. But it's not always available to everyone. You need a large amount of energy load to do it yourself. And that's why we're talking about doing it together, to, you know, doing it in partnership, because that's really the only way you can get the scale needed to do the you know, to be able to access PPA products. So the next slide there is just about you know, high level what the MREP-1 project delivered. So lots of ongoing, or lots of construction jobs and ongoing jobs, significant emissions reduction. As I said, it led to the development of a $200 million wind farm in Western Victoria, which is pretty cool, and it meant a lot to the organisations involved. And importantly, I think, again, for us as a local government, it helped create a model that can be replicated and is being replicated. I think there's maybe 13 or 14 group deals have been done in Australia, you know, different types, but, you know, there's a lot of learnings that are transferable there. And it was such a success that our council made us do it again. So the next slide there is an overview of MREP-2. So there were 7 buyers in that project. Again, all large names, really leading organisations, very, very strong sustainability commitments, and that was the primary driver for all the parties. But of course, it's got to make commercial sense as well, and you know, doing that, having that front of mind as well is really what's necessary for it to be an effective process. We're all in it for the emissions reduction and the systems change, but it also has to make sense, and they do. You know, a well-designed PPA can really help organisations manage financial risk, drive emissions reduction, and deliver wider social and environmental benefits. And interestingly about this group, and maybe the next slide can tell that story a bit more as well. You know, diverse organisations, different load sizes in that MREP-2 group. So there was, you know, a couple of whales and some smaller guys in there, and also diversity of industries. So we had property sector businesses, we had a couple of universities and a couple of manufacturers, and they were all, you know, different backgrounds, different drivers, and, well, you know, different contexts, but they all had same drivers. So there is that ability to, I guess, find common ground, and that's really, really, you know, we'll come on to that, but the how the group is formed and ensuring there's alignment is a really critical factor. So that's just a headline of MREP-2. It was a retail PPA, 10-year or 10.5, because some were looking, you know, people have contracts starting at different times or coming off contract at different times, and out to 2030 was what they're aiming at. So that's what was achieved for the group. It was a retail PPA with a part fixed price model, so that helped manage the financial kind of volatility. You know, it's not fully fixed, it's not fully, you know, variable, and the partial fixed helped to keep within a certain kind of give budget certainty over the long term, which is extremely valuable in a dynamic and insane energy market that, you know, goes up, mostly up, but sometimes down all the time, and it's just, you've got no ability to manage that unless you've got some kind of hedge, which is what a PPA can provide. Pacific Hydro and was the project developer. Tango Energy was the retailer, and the advisors on that, Energy Advice from Energetics and Norton Rose Fulbright, were the legal advisors. The process, which is the next slide, thanks Alex. It was, for us, it was a 2-year process. But the first 6 months were really us going out recruiting businesses who's interested, giving expressions of interest, meeting with people. Probably met with 20 different organisations, and, you know, to understand whether the PPA was the right type of solution for these organisations, and also to get a sense of their alignment, I suppose, and alignment with each other. We had a period of the next 6 months was around workshops and capacity building, you know, forming the group to come together for information sessions, get to know each other a little bit, but mostly just find out information so that they could take that back to their organisations and go, well, should we be involved in something like this? And then to start binding the group together, the next 12 months, well, maybe the 12 to 18 month period, it was around developing an MOU for the parties to agree to work together through a tender process and develop a go-to-market strategy and the tender specifications and do the tender release and evaluation. And really that last 6 months was tender evaluation, due diligence, all the internal engagement that's necessary, contract negotiations and such. So that's probably I think there's it could be a lot quicker than that, but again, that's just how we ran it, and I think we really wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable, had all the information they needed, because the last thing you want is someone pulling out at the end, and then that kind of undermines the process and may even change the pricing. The next slide there is just a bit of a model of what we think the benefits of a group PPA are, and also what the core elements are. So that Venn diagram there, it's for, I think the success factors from our experiences around having good collective decision making, so governance, having shared effort and cost sharing is really important part of the model, and I'll speak to that, and coordination and cooperation, so that facilitation function, someone's got to do that somehow to bring the parties together and keep the process going. So I'll speak to those, unpack those a little bit more in the following slides. So this is just a representation of the governance approach. So there was seven parties, RMIT with a lead, what we called the lead customer, and that meant a few things. That meant they were the contracting entity for the legal advice on behalf of the group. Like, someone's got to do that. We as facilitator couldn't do that. We weren't advisors, but we were helping the process. So someone in the buying group, had to contract those services, and they also contributed their in-house procurement people into the team. City of Melbourne helped the process by funding the energy advice. That was to make it easier for parties to be involved. But yeah, so there was an MOU that governed how they worked together, how they would share costs, the principles that they would, all collectively agreed to. And so that gets, got the group through the tender process, and also happy to share an MOU if anyone, is at that stage. Happy to share our template that worked for this group. And the next slide, Alex. So after a contract is signed for a group, there's a need for a participants agreement. So how are the parties going to work together post-contract over the term of the PPA, 7 years, 10 years? How are they going to make decisions? What's, all the legal things that need to be considered if someone wants to step out? What does that look like? Who pays, etc. So all those things need to be bedded down, and it's really critical to have that governance, or the agreements in place to give everyone comfort, give everyone certainty, give the internal stakeholders the information that they need to be able to sign, because no one's going to sign unless they have all those answers covered. So that's some of the collective decision making parts. The other part to come on to is around shared effort and costs. So there's lots of thanks, Alex, flick that one through. There's lots of ways that the group had to work together. So there's working group meetings to decide, well, what's our tender requirements? How are we going to evaluate it? What percentage weighting should we give to the evaluation criteria? How do we engage advisors? Who's writing the RFQ? What's our strategy as a group? What do we want to get back, and et cetera, et cetera. It's like there's quite a lot in there. And again, there's a need for facilitation in all of that. But just to say, there is a role for each and every buyer in that process to chip in and to share their experience. And we had people that were from sustainability reps in their organizations, people from property, people from kind of different parts of their organization, from finance, and different skill sets and experience brought to bear in the group, and it really helped the dynamic. So yeah, there's quite a bit of work in it, at least in the type of, again, in this kind of formed together type of group PPA that was done here. Different models might be different. It might be more of a lead and tag along type of model, and that's fine too. But this was very much a collaborative, joint decision-making type of process. And in terms of, yes, I think I touched on the shared effort there. I think I've messed my slide order up a little bit, but it gives rise to the need for some coordination. So in our case, we were the facilitator, but you could buy that service in, project management support or facilitation support, or one of the buyers or themselves in the group could play that role if they're sophisticated enough or just the willingness to get in there. And as I say, the playbook's there now. The steps are very, very clearly set out in BRC-A, so you can feel confident that you could just follow through that. The next slide there, Alex, just speaks to the role of a facilitator. So if you're looking at a group process, look to have a think about who's performing this function, whether it's forming the group, ensuring there's alignment and commitment, whether there's good governance, who's doing that, who's organising the meetings, the advisors, the proponents, that when there's discussions to be had, who's running the workshops, who's and particularly I think when you get to the other end, when there's an offer, offers on the table, they're usually they can be quite complex to assess. So the energy advisor will do that, the legal advisor will do that, but there's also a translation piece in there. And that was the role that we played, was to translate some of the maybe complex detail into decks that people could socialize internally and help people in their organizations get across. So if you're in a group process, just think about who's doing that. And these are some of the things to look for as what I think are success factors. And shared effort and costs. I should have had this in a different order, but next slide. Thanks, Alex. So these are kind of representative costs. I don't think, there's no hard and fast for this stuff, but the costs can be significant. So energy advice, and this is kind of a bit of a Rolls Royce of energy advice, but there was business cases done pre-tender. There was substantial modelling done of offers once they were received. There was involvement in commercial negotiations and writing the tender spec before that. So you're looking at 100 grand-ish for that. Legal might be 100 grand as well. There's quite a few things in there. If you're going as a group, there's a need for a ACCC exemption because of it gives rise to competition law issues that just need to be get an exemption from the ACCC for that. It's pretty standard, but it's probably unnecessary, but it's, gives people comfort. And it is it's just one of those things. So all these things, add up, and facilitation is, in MREP 2, we provided that. So I was project lead on MREP 2. So it was pretty much a, one FTE for a couple of years. So you either do that in-house or you buy it in. But that is absolutely essential for a group process. Someone's got to do that, and if you're not doing it, then you should be looking to pay for that, because the deals will, at risk of I guess going off the rails without that role being played. So you add all that up. Even if it was just an individual deal, you're looking at, what's that, 250, K. You do that as part of, if you're doing it as part of a group, the total might be somewhere in the order of 400. That's a big number. But then when you think about, if you're sharing that costs across the group, 50K is actually very good value. And it's not, different organizations may view that differently. Smaller organizations, that's a bigger ask, and could have different cost share percentages, what have you. But when you think about your energy spend and what 50K represents on your total energy spend, it's probably not that much. And the ability to manage your organization's kind of financial risk and potentially get a well-designed PPA will get you better budget management over the long term. 50K is nothing in that long tenure. And there's all these other benefits that can come along with it. So yeah, have that in mind. And just to wrap, I've probably blown my time budget, sorry, but these are just, some of the key points I think for being part of a group PPA, you know, good alignment of the parties, you need good governance, you definitely need expert advisors or facilitators. It's helpful to have that. You know, you need to engage all the way across your organization constantly at every stage, and then you'll get to the end and you have to do it all over again. And that's just what it looks like to get something like this signed, because you know, a 7-year deal, a 10-year deal is a big number, and that's usually beyond anyone's delegated authority. It might need to go to the board, you know, so just bear that in mind and absolutely get that, you know, having MOU at the start gets senior decision making involved early, and then when you come around again, you've dotted all the I's and T's, crossed. It's going to get, you know, the due diligence will happen again, but knowing that it's followed a good process will make it easier to sign off, and then you can celebrate the success after that. So it's there's a lot of value in aggregated deals. There's also a few things to consider, but it's a pretty well trodden path now. And I think if you're out there wondering, you know, whether to get involved in a group or where do I find a group, you know, consider your networks, consider, you know, doing it yourself or talking to your industry association or talking to your, you know, regional partners if you're a group of councils. It's, you know, buy the advisory services in, share the costs. It's totally doable and it's so worth it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Liam. That's really insightful. And we've just got one quick question here from Johan, who asks, on MREP 2, how many potential buyers did you talk to before ending up with 7?
Yeah, probably about 20, Johan. Though, interestingly, when we had our kickoff of those kickoff workshops, there was, I think, 6 serious businesses in there, and they stayed there the whole way through. So no one actually dropped out at that. In fact, one joined, you know, an associated entity of theirs joined in. So yeah, and most of the reason why I guess, you know, it was self-selected, people expressed their interest. But the other 13 were organisations were just they weren't ready for a PPA, or they had different drivers. It just wasn't the right solution for them. So it's not like they didn't like the PPA deal. It's just that it wasn't. Their issues were probably they were too small, or they were more about behind the meter, you know, opportunities, or they weren't, you know, their spend wasn't big enough, whatever it may be. But the ones that showed up, they all stuck through.
That's great. Thanks so much, Liam. And everyone, please thank Liam for a fantastic presentation, really insightful, very helpful, and also particularly helpful with some of those cost estimates there. Obviously, a little bit of a different model, as Liam mentioned there, is more the sort of the Lion and the AHA model, where it's more of a sort of a tag along. And obviously the costs would be quite different, probably quite a lot less in that alternative sort of a model. But in this collaborative model, that gives you a really good idea for sort of the investment and then that value for the organisations. So thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thanks all. Good luck.
Thank you. And so just moving along now to the next slide, I'm just going to hand back over to JP. You heard a little bit about some of those elements, such as an MOU and terms of reference, particularly around that stage 1 and that work that the City of Melbourne did, which we've termed business development here, around really shopping around the idea for getting some participants. I know that in my group, finding partners was one of the key barriers or the challenges. And so I'm going to leave it with JP now to start at that point and take us through the process. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jackie. How are we going for time? It feels like
we've that's okay. We might be 5 minutes behind, but
okay.
It's not your fault. I think it might have been mine, but doesn't matter. Let's
all good. I'll speak at a
reasonable we've got
pace
plenty
then.
of
I was
time.
wondering if we could even slow down a bit, because we've made such good time. But I think this slide is quite self-explanatory. And Liam also shared that his process in his presentation. So setting up the group and forming an MOU, what are your objectives and all these things. Then it gets serious. You need budget, you need to procure and select energy and legal consultants. Maybe it's a good test run before selecting the project. everyone agreeing to the RFQ and getting it out the door. That can be tricky for just for an individual organisation, for everyone in the organisation to agree the plan. Issuing the tender, evaluation, shortlisting and negotiation, and then project close, which can take 1 week or 1 year. Due diligence, procurement, marketing, promotion, contract extension, and establishing a PPA. And don't underestimate marketing and promotion. It takes time to really get those words right for your organisation, to get the press release out. It can be quite time consuming as well, and is a great benefit from these group deals. It really appeals to the public of collaboration and getting together and getting a bigger outcome by being a group. That's something that's a real marketing boom. I should say on Liam's MREP2, him and John Griffith obviously facilitated that deal, and it was a key recipe to their success there. You can hear Liam's very competent on energy and would have had great standing in front of all those buyers, their legal advisors, procurement people, CFO, and so on. So that was a key part of their success as facilitators, in addition to the energy consultants and lawyers. So on to the next step. There's some chat going on in the chat, some questions to Liam, which is great. Alex, next slide. So how to get started. So by establishing the buyers group and forming an agreement, understanding the basics. So they say that PPAs are 70% education. It's not core business for all of you, I'm sure, of understanding the national electricity market, 5-minute trading intervals and bidding and long-term contracting and baseload futures and so on. But it really has to happen. So there's no sweaty fingers signing the final contract at the end, that you ensure that all your internal stakeholders of each organisation have enough understanding of the energy market and reasons behind the deal. Understand how you currently procure electricity, who are your retailers, when do their contracts finish, what's your annual load consumption, different for each state, are you currently buying green power or otherwise? So to seek interest from like-minded participants, question Jade had for Liam, and he spoke about it a bit there as well. What's the market opportunity to build the group and knowledge sharing? I do think it's a key benefit of groups that all of the individuals working on the deal from each organisation get to learn from each other in that knowledge sharing. Establishing governance structures and decision-making principles, so group terms of reference, agreeing common objectives, things like are we going 100% renewables, are we focused on additionality or open to existing assets, these sorts of things. PPA education, internal support building and facilitating group communications, how will that be done? How can that be done? So BRC-A has a whole bunch of PPA training and resources. We have our boot camps, tools, guides and primers, and also finding a consultant or advisor that is a subject matter expert to support the initiative and the participants. I think it's back to you now, Jackie.
There we are. Fantastic. Okay. Thanks very much for that. And obviously, these slides will be available. You didn't have to memorize each of those steps. You'll also be receiving a workbook, which will have each of those, a bit more detail on each of those case studies, and also a number of other elements. There is also an explainer if you prefer to sort of read about aggregation. Also, just mentioning on our website, we do at BRC-A have the facility for
control of your energy with thousands of others.
I think someone's computer just went a bit crazy there. But yes, take control of your energy with others. And so if you are interested in registering your interest to join a group, you can do that. Just jump onto our website. We're not going to bombard you with lots of advertising. It's really just about being able to put people in touch with other people who are interested in doing that. So we're going to just have a little sort of question answer session now, which I think will be really important for some people. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, and on this slide here, we do have a couple of other, another discussion question in case we need it, to understand if your reason for considering has changed throughout this, workshop, as often happens once you learn a little bit more about a topic. But I think before we launch into that, we might just discuss a couple of these questions that are here. I had a question here from Rick Walters. Timing seems to me to be the hardest challenge. How many of these group deals are there in the making, and how do you time getting into the queue? So in terms of the number of deals out there, it's pretty hard to tell. We can certainly tell you that we know of at least 5 or 6, and then occasionally one will just pop up from the side that we didn't know about, and they're announcing already. We've got a number of others on our website. If you go into the news section, you can read about such as the Barwon in the Barwon region, Barwon Health, Barwon Water, and Geelong Port got together to do a PPA. So there are a whole bunch of them out there that are certainly worth having a look into. And as I mentioned, if you register your name there or your organisation, we can certainly try and put you in touch. I think Liam has also just provided a little answer there. And yes, are often a bottom-up sort of situation. Did you want to add anything to that verbally there, Liam?
It's a real gap in the market. There ought to be facilitation services that you can say, we want to join a group deal, but the reality is that part of the market isn't mature yet. So I think you look to see what you can do through your peer networks, your industry networks, your councils, find out what's going on, see what you can do with others. And if there's nothing happening, maybe you might be able to start something. And as I say, there are a lot of resources out there to do just that. So it's not a great answer, but that's all we got so far.
No, that's good. Thanks, Liam. You're absolutely right. There is this opportunity. Some consultancies do look at facilitating as well, although obviously you ideally want that to be separate from your energy consultant so that you can sort of keep those two elements separate. And as Liam said, industry associations, etc., are looking at this. Maybe talk to your council as well. So just moving along there, just a couple of other questions here. What do you need to have done before registering interest or before joining a group? Nothing really. If you're just interested in starting to look into this, you can just jump on the website, let us know. And then we can have a chat with you. There will be people in the group who've gone a long way down another path and know a lot about PPAs. There'll be people in the group who really don't know much at all. The process will be a process of bringing everyone up to the same level. That's really necessary in order to execute these sorts of deals. But hopefully that's a helpful answer for you.
Sorry, Jackie, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I've just sent a link, everyone. So feel free to click on that link and fill out the form to express your interest if that's something you'd like to do now. Just saves you from going to another page and then clicking a link anyway. So yeah, feel free to do that. And I'll repost it so it's most recent. Anyway, sorry, back to you, Jackie.
Thanks. No, that's great. Thanks for jumping in there, Alex. Just a question here also from Mike. Mike's asked, does BRC-A have a list of capable energy and legal consultants for PPAs? Yes, we do. And it's available for free on our website. Just go over to resources and then have a look at service providers. And there's a list there. It's not comprehensive. They're the companies we tend to deal with most. But I'm sure there are others out there as well. Is an energy consultant similar to a broker? Yes, some are just really energy brokers. Others are more consultative. So they might look at they might even look at your whole net zero piece. There might be sustainability and energy consultants. So you've got quite a range out there. It's really important to be clear when you're going out to look for a consultant to understand all the services they provide and what you might need to get from others. But generally speaking, speaking, you are looking more for an energy consultant here. Your sustainability consultant will know about PPAs, but may not be the right group to help you through a PPA process. Can we sort the list by state? Most of them will operate in most states. You can obviously, it's not a huge list. You can look at where they're based on their websites. And then the final question is, when can we expect this recording to be available? It's very shortly, is it not, Jade?
That's correct. As soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I'm just double checking if we've got any other questions there. Does anyone else have a question? You're welcome to ask it verbally if you are able to put yourself, take yourself off mute. We're very happy to answer any questions. I know sometimes in these forums it can be challenging to ask a question you might feel might sound silly. If you have a feeling in that way, feel free to just get in touch with us and ask us questions. We're very happy to take those. I'll still keep an eye on the chat, but I'll just take you through the final points then, if there are no other immediate questions, unless anyone can see I've missed any in the chat. I can't see any that I've missed in the chat there for now, but please jump in and tell me. So we've talked about that opportunity and vision, and hopefully given you a little bit of an idea for what you might be able to achieve, what kind of impact you could achieve, what sort of leadership that you could show by participating in or even leading a group buy process. We've also talked through some of the benefits and challenges to the group PPAs, ranging from all of the PPA benefits and challenges, and then right through to those that are specific to sort of more the group situation. All of those need to be considered, obviously, in making a decision. But as we said, with the industry case examples, case study examples, there are plenty of organisations that have gone before you. If you are a council, I encourage you to look at the SSROC examples, and also the Victorian Renewable Energy Procurement. I think they had 48 councils in that one. It's certainly a path well trodden for councils by this stage. And a couple of other, IFM investors in more the corporate side of things. So we are, really talking about a lot of examples right across industry there, and more of those on our website. We heard from Liam and heard some fantastic insights there about things to consider and costs, and how this can work. And then we took you finally through some of those steps, and what you need to do in order to get started. Next slide. Thanks, Alex. So what's next? We have a buyer's diagnostic tool that will look that will help you to look at your options. It does ask you if you're interested. This is on our website, sorry. Ask you if you're interested in participating or learning more about aggregations, and it will just send you that information. But it looks at what your options are on your own as an organisation procuring. So it's worth doing that. As we say here, it is free. Watch the masterclasses online. Obviously, we mentioned them earlier. 50% of you didn't attend those, so we really encourage you to have a look at them. Again, they're free, so why not? Join our PPA bootcamp training. We do hold these usually a couple of times a year, and we're also doing a couple of them in the regions in the near future. So get in touch with us. You can also register your interest to learn more about those, or to be notified of when we're going to set the date for that. And then you can obviously just get in touch if you've got a question for us. Just flicking through those slides. I think we might have doubled up on that one. Just going to the next one there. There's a little bit more about that PPA training bootcamp, that 1.5 days, and learning from what we call our buyers faculty network, who are organisations like the City of Melbourne, like many of the others who we talked about here, who have done it before. It covers all of renewable energy procurement, particularly focused on PPAs. It's not specific to group buying, but we do cover aggregation in those sessions as well. So feel free to register your interest to find out when those are on next. And then on the final slide, just flicking over there, Alex, we would love to hear what you thought about today's session. We'd love some feedback. So please do use that QR code and let us know. We've had a really great time delivering these sessions to you. We have more information about our training. We've got a range of different training from sort of basic modules right through to more advanced. And you can find all of that out by getting in touch with us, looking at our website, or having a little bit of a look at our prospectus. So that's that. So we've just got a couple of minutes now for any final questions. Jade has popped in there a link also to that Survey Monkey within the chat.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jackie. I think the feedback's been wonderful already from everyone who joined us today. I'd just like to say thanks again for coming along today. And for those who joined us for multiple sessions, we really appreciate it. I'd love to leave you with a few bits of information and reflections of this masterclass series. Over the 6 sessions, we had over 400 individuals register, which represented 178 unique businesses, which is just fantastic. That included industry groups as well. And this masterclass series was designed to fill a market gap, like we said, but be accessible and evolve with your needs. All of these sessions have been recorded and they're available on the Business Renewable Centre YouTube channel and website. And the resources that we've shared with you from various sessions are being compiled into easy to read guides, and they'll be available later this month. But as I said, these materials are designed to evolve, and your feedback has been so helpful in getting us to this point. So please take a minute to fill out the survey. And if you have anything nice to say, we love to hear it. And please reach out to myself or the Business Renewable Centre team if you have any questions. It's been fantastic to spend this time with you, and good luck on your renewables journey. Thanks so much, Jackie. Thanks, BRC-A team. And thanks, Liam.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having us. And yeah, looking forward to hopefully chatting with a few of you after the session about your processes. Thank you.